Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Rural and Farming Executive Advisory Committee. Welcome also to those accessing the meeting via the live stream to YouTube. During the live broadcast, members and officers are asked to please ensure that mobile phones are placed in silent mode. Only audio from the microphones will be captured on the live stream, therefore please ensure they're switched on when speaking and switched off when you have finished speaking. Minutes will be produced in the usual way and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on YouTube until such time as the minutes are produced. So the first item on today's agenda is the appointment of the chairman for the municipal year 2024-25. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Mrs Laws.
Thank you. I would like to propose Councillor Tim Taylor.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Marks, thank you. Are there any other nominations? In the absence of any further nominations, it's therefore proposed that Councillor Tim Taylor is appointed as the Chairman of the Rural and Farming Executive Advisory Committee for the municipal year 2024-25. Is that agreed? Thank you. I'll hand over the conduct of the meeting to the Chairman.
Thank you very much, everyone. So I'll begin the agenda, item 2, and call upon member services to report any apologies for absence, please.
Good afternoon. We have an apology from Councillor Jan French and also Peter Catchpole.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3 is to an appointment of the Vice Chairman for the municipal year 24-25. I would like to nominate Jan French, please. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Laws. Any other nominations? No. Thank you. The proposal is therefore to appoint Councillor Jan French as the Vice Chairman of the Rural and Farming Committee for the municipal year 24-25. Is that all agreed? Councillor Jan French is duly appointed.
It's just worth noting, though, thank you, Councillor Mrs Laws, for your comment, that Councillor Mrs French did confirm her agreement to that post should she go through that process.
So we're being asked to approve the public minutes at pages 3 to 10 of the agenda pack as a correct record of the meeting which took place on the 13th of March 2024. Can I ask any member who does not agree with the minutes to indicate that below? Thank you. So we've got no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record of the meeting, so they all now agreed. Agenda item 5 is to report additional items for consideration which the Chairman deems urgent by virtue of special circumstances now to be specified. I've certainly got none. No, okay. So agenda item number 6 is to receive any declarations of interest under the local code of conduct or any interest under the code of conduct in respect of any items to be discussed at this meeting. If you have anything to declare, please can you inform the meeting now. Councillor Laws.
Thank you. Can I just register the fact I'm planning portfolio holder at Fenland and also for flooding? I wouldn't take part in discussions on any planning application and I certainly wouldn't vote on it. Thank you.
Councillor Marks.
Thank you. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Committee, so again would take no part in any discussions regarding planning or any voting.
Thank you. And regarding myself, there is a discussion coming up later on which Mr James Palmer is going to be showing us all. It's something what I do know about, I'm slightly involved in, but I've got absolutely no conflict of interest in it at all. So, thank you. So item number 7, the recent motions to full council relating to rural and farming matters. Is there any questions from the floor on this item? Agenda item number 8 is the update from MAGPAS. So I shall now pass over to Emma Sanders to give us an update on the work MAGPAS is undertaking in relation to the rural community. Thanks, Emma.
And hopefully people can hear me. Right. Also, hopefully my presentation will actually go with the clicker. So thank you very much indeed for having me, everybody. Yes, MAGPAS Air Ambulance is a very important part of our community, and I want to just start by very quickly showing you what we are all about and why we are so fundamentally important here. To start with, I think it's really important to go back to why we started. We started in 1971. This makes us the oldest charity of this kind. In 1971, we were the brainchild of two general practitioners in the top left-hand corner there, Dr. Neville Silverstone and Dr. Derek Cracknell, both local to Cambridgeshire. And they were aware that there were about 8,000 people being killed and injured on our roads back then. And it was at the time when the ambulance service was run by the town council. The people driving the ambulance had pretty much 1 week's worth of first aid training, and they scooped and ran with you. So basically you had an incident, they would put you into the back of an ambulance and they would take you to hospital. When you got to hospital, there were no A&E departments, no casualties or anything like that, no consultants waiting for you. So it was a very different picture of medicine back then. But they got together over 120 GPs in Cambridgeshire, and together they became MAGPAS, Mid Anglia General Practitioner Accident Service. And in the first year of practicing, they reduced road deaths by over 35%. So significant difference by taking the medicine that they knew to the patient wherever they were. So back then, as I say, traditionally road traffic collisions, it has really changed since then. However, in that time, the idea was to save lives, but also to limit disability by taking this medicine to the patient wherever they were. Now, I feel really proud of the fact that although this is what they were doing 53 years ago, the medicine has changed, who is delivering it has changed, how we get there has changed, everything has pretty much changed. But our ethos is exactly the same. That has not changed at all. We want to save a life, and we want to reduce the risk of a disability having a life-changing impact. And that's what we do. So to show this to you, I'm going to show you an 8-minute video, I hope, and let's hope it plays.
MAGPAS Air Ambulance is a life-saving emergency medical service, activated, on average, 4 times a day to the most seriously ill and injured people in our community. People in life-threatening emergencies, when every second counts. The MAGPAS Air Ambulance medical team consists of a senior doctor and a critical care paramedic on every shift, specially trained in pre-hospital emergency medicine. This means that they have learned how to deliver treatments and carry out procedures at the scene of an emergency that are usually only available in a hospital.
We're able to provide treatments such as anaesthetics in the same way that you might have in a hospital. And we're also able to provide blood transfusions for major trauma patients. And we're able to take over patients' ventilation and breathing and support their life when they may be critically unwell. We're having to do this with only the bags that we've got on our backs. We have a very limited amount of kit. This provides a very different set of challenges from doing the same job in a hospital. Sometimes the conditions that we work in are very challenging as well. We can work anywhere in the outdoor space. So we could be working on the edge of a river, we could be working in a farm, we could be working in the darkness under a bridge. And this again makes the job much more difficult and adds another layer of complexity to what can be already very difficult medical situations. It's a very different environment, obviously, from being in a hospital, and a lot less controlled, a lot more chaotic. So that adds additional challenges to what we do. Because the challenges are so different, we have to be specifically trained to work at MAGPAS or on an air ambulance. So every year we have a new group of doctors who come and work for the air ambulance and learn the skill on the job.
Alice was 19 years old when she had a cardiac arrest at home and needed the care of the MAGPAS Air Ambulance team.
It's every parent's nightmare, really, to know that's happening to your daughter. So it's really, really scary, but equally a real relief to have the ambulance crew and then the MAGPAS crew turn up so quickly, because they really, really did get there quickly and got straight down to the business of caring for Alice.
So there were a number of things that we did for Alice. The first one was we provided CPR. We gained access into her veins and gave her adrenaline. And we put a tube down into her throat so that we could give her 100% oxygen as efficiently as possible. Because one of her lungs wasn't inflating, we also performed a surgical procedure while she was on the kitchen floor, which involved cutting into the side of her chest to allow her lung to re-expand. This would not normally be done by a paramedic crew on a scene. This is something that would either be done by a critical care team, or more usually it would be done in a hospital.
MAGPAS Air Ambulance is dispatched by both East of England and East Midlands Ambulance Service. When a 999 call comes into the region, critical care paramedics like myself and my colleagues man a critical care desk. We are trained to monitor all 999 calls coming in and search for the most serious cases. We also receive requests directly from ambulance service crews on scene if they need additional support or feel their patient requires life-saving treatments that only an air ambulance can provide. It is in these cases that we dispatch a critical care team such as MAGPAS Air Ambulance.
MAGPAS Air Ambulance can be called to anyone at any time, but most frequently attend road traffic collisions, where there can be multiple casualties, serious medical events, such as a person in cardiac arrest, or accidental injuries. MAGPAS Air Ambulance use a state-of-the-art air ambulance to get the skills of their doctors and paramedics, along with their life-saving equipment, to the patient as quickly as possible.
The helicopter flies at speeds of greater than 160 miles per hour. This means we will fly to anywhere in the region in less than 30 minutes. Given the nature of work we do, we are given priority over other aircraft. This includes priority through international airports. During the hours of darkness, we use night vision goggles. This gives us enhanced visibility, which allows us to fly safely at night.
MAGPAS Air Ambulance can be dispatched to anywhere across the east of England and into the East Midlands, caring for a population of 10 million. But the majority of their activations are to people in Cambridgeshire, Bedfordshire and the surrounding counties. MAGPAS Air Ambulance operates 24/7, around the clock every day of the year, using the helicopter between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and their 3 rapid response vehicles through the night when flying is more complicated and the speed advantage is reduced.
We can be called to anyone at any point. It could be any one of us. But we're most frequently called to men aged 25 to 64. Every week we are called to a child in a life-threatening emergency. These can often be the hardest jobs for us.
This really is medicine at the edge of life and death. And everything MAGPAS Air Ambulance does is aimed at saving lives, keeping families together and reducing the long-term impact of a patient's injuries.
When the call comes in, we grab our helmets and head out to the aircraft. We can't help but be aware this could be a life-changing incident, not just for the patient, but for their family too. A patient's someone's mum, dad, brother or sister. It's a huge responsibility, but also very rewarding, knowing that we can make the difference that keeps a family together.
So we were at a swimming lesson in the middle of a field, a good distance away from a hospital. Zach started to feel unwell and then started to have a seizure. I knew that this was really a life-threatening occasion, that perhaps an ambulance wouldn't get to us on time. We were at least half an hour away, and in rush hour traffic I was thinking, will they get here? He was unconscious, he was getting bluer. It was as serious as things can get. I heard this of the air ambulance landing, and then I remember the doctors running across in their big bright orange life-saving uniforms, and they said, you know, it's Magpass Air Ambulance, and they started giving him the oxygen, and he started to get colour in his cheeks, and to stop his seizures they had to give him a life-saving drug. I think if we'd had to wait, I'm not sure whether I'd have this 11-year-old that I've got today, which is a great boy. It feels lucky that I live in a country where there are these services. It feels lucky that people support these things. It feels lucky that doctors give their time to do these things. I think I feel really lucky.
Magpass Air Ambulance is a charity funded by donations. The organisation needs to raise in the region of £6 million every year to keep their helicopter flying, their doctors and paramedics responding 24/7, and their equipment and drugs stocked and ready to save lives.
Magpass Air Ambulance is so fortunate to have support from people within the communities in which we operate. Magpass Air Ambulance is literally powered by people, whether that's our supporters, our donors, our staff, our clinicians, or our volunteers. It really does take all of us now and into the future to continue to save lives. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you. That gives you a little insight into what it is that we do. Now, you can't quite see it there, but in our jobs for 2023, over 50% of them were to Cambridgeshire. In fact, it's about 55%. We were called out over 1,900 times. So we are being called out an average of about 5 to 6 times a day. And we can be called to pretty much anything where someone's life is in danger or they're at a risk of that disability having a life-changing effect. Now, as we said in the video, some of the jobs that we are tasked to, and I reflect these sort of in the rural community, is that things like cardiac arrests and road traffic collisions are, of course, the 2 biggest jobs that we attend. But we also get a number of other incidents, such as falls. They don't even need to be falls from height. We've seen some pretty horrendous injuries from where people have fallen, even from a standing position. Doesn't necessarily have to be, 20 foot up and you fall and it causes a traumatic incident. It can be much lower than that. But things like trauma, gunshots, other penetrating wounds, we're seeing a lot of these injuries. And we carry specialist equipment and specialist medics who have gone through enhanced training to be able to deliver the special requirements that you need there and then. So, for example, we have it looks like a bandage. It's called Celox. And it's about £60 for a roll of this product. And when you unroll it, it's about sort of 1.5 metres, 2 metres long. And this particular product has seashells, is impenetrated with seashells. And that helps promote the clotting of the blood. It provides like a plug, if you like. So for wounds that are open, it was used traditionally in the battlefield, so that's why we use it now. So those kind of wounds can be packed with this product and it will clot, it reduces the amount of time that you have to apply pressure, and that alone can save a life. It did with a tree surgeon we had called Tom, who unfortunately cut the base of his neck with a chainsaw. And that was a significant injury. And this particular product, Celox, really came into its own because it was enough to stabilise him. We could then sedate him, put him into an induced coma, take over his breathing for him, and get him to hospital where he was rushed into surgery. So it's these kind of things that we are doing that are bringing that care to wherever you are. Now, of course, in our rural communities, not everybody has to be sort of literally in the middle of a field. You could be travelling off to Tesco's. You know, you could be anywhere within that. And of those 1,900 call-outs that we had last year, about 200 of those were to Chatteris and Wisbech and the surrounding villages alone. That's a lot of call-outs. So I talked a little bit about the sort of the general anaesthetics. We can take over your breathing. And by the way, when I say we, not me, I'm a fundraiser. Please don't think I can do that because I can't. But our medics can do this. So literally, as I say, taking over your breathing. And the cost of doing this is £135 for all the consumable equipment that we take for that purpose. The monitor and all of that sort of stuff is a little bit costlier, but the actual, the tubing, the drugs, the things that we are using that get disposed of afterwards, £135 to properly put someone into an induced coma. We can travel to you by either car or helicopter, whichever is the best method of transport. Believe it or not, the helicopter doesn't necessarily have to be the best transport at that time. Depending on weather, depending on location and so on, sometimes the car is even better. So we have the luxury 24 hours, 7 days a week of having access to 3 vehicles, but we also have between 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening access to a helicopter, which can also aid in the recovery of the patient. So helicopter or car, talking about that, only 10% of our patients get airlifted to hospital. You have to fit a very, very strict range of criteria to be airlifted. That will depend on sometimes how stable you are, because to be able to deal with the patient in the air is very difficult. So actually, being in a land ambulance can be better. If it is absolutely time critical, then you may very well be in the helicopter to go to hospital. But having that option, because of the people that support us and fund us, having that option is best for our patients. So it really is a whistle-stop tour on MAGPAS. I normally do this for over an hour. I really possibly bore people, but I have so much that I want to tell people about how crucial your support is to allow us to do this for the people in your own community. Every single penny that we are donated goes into our service to help our patients. And we are so proud of all of our supporters who can help us do that, because we want to be there for everybody, and to do that, we need your support. Have I got time for any questions from anybody?
So, thanks, Emma. Now, I'm one of the lucky ones in one way, because I've worked with MAGPAS in the past. I've seen what they do. I've seen them in action. But when I was chairman of the Fenland Farmers, we also did a lot of fundraising for them via the tractor runs. But I know one of the last times Emma was talking was that you guys pay a lot more for your drugs than what the East Anglian Air Ambulance does. Is that still the case, or has that changed somewhat now on buying power?
So that's not quite the case. The case really is that Magpas Air Ambulance purchases everything to be able to deliver our service. We don't get support from the NHS in that, we don't get government funding directly, and we don't get national lottery funding. So that means that we therefore have to go through the process of applying for grants and trusts and foundations. We have to apply. We can purchase some things from the NHS. Some things we can get an NHS discount on. They tend to be the products that you can get on a land ambulance. We can get an NHS discount on. But things like ketamine, which we use fairly often, and the other drugs such as fentanyl and tranexamic acid, which are used all through these sort of clottings and anaesthetics and so on. All of these products we have to buy ourselves because you wouldn't find them on a land ambulance. So that's, I think, sometimes what is considered almost the controversy is that we are purchasing things to be able to allow us to do this job.
Thanks, Emma. So, I mean, Magpas love people like me. Somebody's liable to get wrapped up in a tractor that shoots, that rides horses, and what have you. They're going to come out to me at some point in my life, I'm sure. But have we got any questions for Emma from anybody on the floor?
Emma, hello. I hope you're not going to be offended by the questions I'm going to ask you. But I actually do a lot of fundraising for a particular charity as well. And I'm very conscious about charities and how the money is spent. I'm not going to name the charities because we've called them out in the past. One particular national charity has very prestigious offices in London, and the money goes to support that. Also, their fundraisers are paid good salaries with pensions and provided with a car. And the other point is that we actually found out from one national charity eventually that only 7% of all the money raised went to the people that needed it. So, as I say, I hope you're not offended, but my time is free that I give my charity. I don't take any petrol allowance, and I don't charge for my time when I'm fundraising and doing presentations similar to what you're doing. So my question is, obviously the doctors and nurses give their time freely. And also, what other money is taken out of that fundraising money? Thank you.
So it's a really, really good question. And up until about 10 years ago, there was a small paid staff base, and pretty much all the doctors and paramedics volunteered their time for free. So that went on for about 25 to 30 years of our service. So we are all paid. We do take, obviously, running costs out of donated money. You said 7% went to the charity's output, if you like. We're very proud that over 70% of ours goes into the service and running of the service. Because of the nature of the work that we do, we have to pay people to do that work. We need to raise £6 million a year, and to be able to do that and get the consistency to be able to provide the service that we do, we have to pay people to do that because it is a job. So whereas we have a pot of about 60 volunteers who come and assist us with the administration of running events, the sort of the fundraising side, we've got some helping out with accounts and so on. All of their time is given freely, and we have hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteered time every month to help us really with part of that running of the service. But we're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And with the best will in the world, getting a consultant, a senior doctor, to come now and give up their time for free is very hard. However, they do occasionally still offer back shifts where they don't take a salary for that. Not as common as a paid post, of course, but to be able to have the consistency, the CQC registration of outstanding and so on. There is a lot of solid work that has to go to making this very, very belt and braces, very compliant, and that you just cannot get with a volunteer base. That has to be employed positions. But we are proud, as I say, over 70% of that goes back into the service and everything that the patients need.
Thank you, and I think that's an excellent explanation, and also the percentage that does go back. Through you, Chair, can I ask another question? Thank you. You mentioned the National Lottery. You don't actually apply for that.
So National Lottery funding we haven't had. So you have to be able to qualify for lots of these things, you have to go through an application process, and we haven't been successful with National Lottery applications. However, we have been successful with certain other applications that we have made. So, for example, dare I mention the word COVID, where there was a big pot of money that came from the Libor Foundation and air ambulances were encouraged to apply for pots of that money to be able to help us in that time when all of our fundraising had obviously been decimated pretty much, and there was nothing going on in the community. So we still have to apply, we still have to be awarded and qualify, and then we were awarded some money at that particular time. And that allowed us to get through some of the COVID times. We also had a grant from that same Libor Foundation to be able to purchase the land that our new airbase is on. So we were awarded some money through that. So we do still apply for monies, and our CEO, as part of a wider organisation, the AAUK, which is Air Ambulances UK, which sort of kind of is almost like a helpline, if you like, for air ambulances across the country. We all belong to that, and it's a great source of information, a great support network for everybody as well. And once a year, they lobby government as well for further funding in certain areas.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. I'm sure you've explored it, but there are professionals out there that complete these applications. And I'm sure you've approached them, and you should have had a successful result because they're pretty good.
So we do have an application, a lady who applies for trusts and grants and foundations. So we will always have applications in many places. But what we also do is we apply for things that we actually need. So, for example, if we need new ventilators to be able to take over that patient's breathing, they're just over £16,000 each, those ventilators. And so we will apply for a certain pot of money for certain places. And a lot of people like to give money for a certain piece of equipment, absolutely. And that is brilliant, but there is still, as I mentioned earlier, there are still running costs that have to be met to support the charity, to enable us to be able to do these things. So running costs are a huge part of what we need, so that when we do need to buy a ventilator, we can do so. When we do need to then go and buy a new tube to go into someone's windpipe, then we can buy that, rather than have money set aside for certain things. The ability to be able to choose freely where that money needs to go is much better. So when I talk about running costs, it doesn't necessarily mean salaries, it means whatever pieces of equipment that the team need, we can do that.
Just one more point, and I'm sure you've covered it. I actually trained in the health service. And I did come out of the health service and work into private, and I work for a pharmaceutical firm. I'm sure you've harnessed them because they do have a wealth of money, and they do have a nice big pocket where they actually do support certain fundraising schemes. They don't have to be UK based. Most of them are in Switzerland, and that's where the money is. So if I can help with that afterwards, certain names and contact numbers, I'd be happy to do so.
That would be amazing. So I am a fundraiser, but our doctors and paramedics, and, well, we're all led by medical staff. So we have a medical director and a medical operations manager. And together they really steer with those medical staff exactly what it is we need and how we need it. So I would be delighted to send those details via their way to investigate further. And thank you for your questions.
Thanks, Emma. Got any other questions on the floor? Councillor Count?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation, Emma. Very useful, very interesting. I personally oversee a park, and I often see Magpas land just outside the back of my building. I can hear them coming and then look out for them. So I know how busy you are. Mine seems like a naive question because I just didn't know this before. I didn't know you had vehicles on the land. I just thought you had air ambulances, which led me to thinking, why would you have a vehicle instead of an ambulance, which you'll answer in a moment, which led me to thinking, how does somebody call you? Because we call the 999 if we need it. And so is it them that call you and then you make a decision? But how does that work? How did you end up with vehicles almost in competition with ambulances, and how do you get called? Thanks.
So the call-out process is for either a member of the public or sometimes even an ambulance crew that is on scene. When they call 999, on that desk there is a critical care paramedic, and the critical care paramedic is usually employed by an air ambulance. So they are very, very aware of air ambulance work and what the air ambulance team can do and the difference it can make for a patient. So that critical care paramedic on that desk listens into every single call, and there are about 3,500 to 4,000 of those every day. And they're listening to everyone, and they're looking at them coming up on a computer screen, and they're going to be looking for keywords. So things like fallen from height, stabbings, shootings, cardiac arrests, that sort of thing. And depending on what that looks like, then they will dispatch the nearest available air ambulance critical care team. So that will then trigger a call to us by that dispatch desk to say that this is what's happening. Now, it might be that there is a 40-year-old man in cardiac arrest in Wisbech. Now, because that is outside of a 10-minute radius of our airbase, the helicopter is probably going to be the fastest mode of transport to get to that 40-year-old. So we would, the pilot would look over the shoulder of the person taking that call and go, right, that's in Wisbech, we're going to fly. So providing the weather is compatible with flying, and providing that, you know, it's the visibility, it's whether or not it's thunder and lightning, or whether, you know, it could be high winds over 55 miles an hour, then they will send the helicopter if it is within those parameters. If it's not within those parameters, then we have to drive. So the cars are always the best form of transport if the helicopter can't fly. So those cars are a delivery mechanism rather than a full working ambulance. So those cars, on board those, and you have exactly the same equipment in the helicopter as you do in the rapid response cars. And in those response cars, there is the key bags to be able to literally perform whatever operation is required. We carry blood, we carry our ventilators, we've got suction units, which literally do what they say on the tin. So we have all of these equipments in both platforms, and then they will deliver the team with that equipment to the patient in that car. And that's the important part. So then we transfer the patient to an ambulance where they've got the stretcher on board. So we have got a stretcher in the helicopter, but again, if we're not, remember we were flying 10% of patients, so 90% of those patients are going to go by land ambulance to the hospital. And one of the reasons for that is by the time you load the patient up into the helicopter, that can actually take up to about 20 minutes to make sure that that's all safe and secure. By the time you've lifted the patient off the ground and get them loaded into the helicopter, strapped in, it could be about 20 minutes before you can lift. When you fly into somewhere like Addenbrooke's, the helipad is far away from the A&E department. So you have to be met by a land ambulance there to take you then 20 minutes to get the patient off, get them into the land ambulance, drive them then. So actually, when you take into account all of these factors, sometimes the car and the combination of a land ambulance can actually be quicker. And that's all about what we need to do for the patient. Whichever suits their needs the most. You know, one day that same situation could be flying somebody, the next day that same situation could be driving somebody to the hospital, depending on how that patient is reacting to what we're doing to them. Is that okay?
Councillor Humphrey.
Yeah, just a quick one. A slight bit of confusion around the Magpass and the East Anglian Air Ambulance and why they both operate in the same area and how that works.
So, we have been in Cambridgeshire for 53 years. I don't know how long they were in Norfolk. That was their first base in Norfolk. And then they moved into Cambridge, I think it was about 20 years ago. I could be a bit wrong. But certainly, yes, we've been well established in Cambridgeshire for over 50 years. So I couldn't explain why they would choose Cambridgeshire as a base. But certainly we are two different charities providing very similar care. And there are times when multiple air ambulances will be needed on scene as well, so we can also double up on jobs.
So they basically work side by side, providing the same care for the same area. I'm just, the fact that there were two similar charities.
Yeah, so pretty much. So the difference really has moved away. There was quite a long time where Magpass was the only doctor paramedic team, where we were the only team that would provide a separate aviation crew member to assist with navigation. A lot of air ambulances across the country would use a paramedic for that job. So we were sort of very different for that a long time in those capacities, and also training our doctors and paramedics to exactly the same level so they could interchange their jobs. And it became more like an operator and an assistant rather than a doctor or paramedic role. And that was very important to us. But that's a model that's now pretty much been rolled out across the country. Many people have followed that way. But what's really important to note, I think, is that Magpass Air Ambulance has been the forerunner of this type of medicine. We applied to the General Medical Council to get pre-hospital emergency medicine recognised as a subspecialty. This was in early 2010s. And the General Medical Council said to us that we had made history that day because Magpass Air Ambulance had created the subspecialty of pre-hospital emergency medicine, which is what this is. And nowadays, every air ambulance medic that you see on the telly and out there doing their job has taken part in the training that Magpass Air Ambulance designed. So we are as I say, the forerunners of this type of medicine. We've been in Cambridgeshire over 50 years, but I couldn't explain why their second base was chosen as Cambridge. I don't know. But all air ambulances doing an amazing job.
I'm aware that, because I've done a bit of work with Dr. Katani, who was recently High Sheriff, and he's a big supporter, obviously, because in his early days as a GP, he would be on call 24/7 and actually have to go to the roadside in those accidents, probably during the time of the inception of this.
Yeah, he absolutely was. Dr. Katani was absolutely a very, very early member of Magpass Air Ambulance, and we see him fairly often. And in fact, Dr. Neville Silverstone, who was one of our founders, is still very much involved with the charity. And it's amazing. He's in his late 90s. He comes on in. He comes and chats to everybody. The stories he tells, I can only begin to. I could do a whole load, but an amazing man, and every month he meets with our CEO for lunch and they catch up and he gives his opinion, and he is still a mentor to our CEO, even though our CEO has taken us through massive changes in the 10 years he's been with us. He still listens to Neville as being his one of his guiding voices, which is phenomenal.
Thank you, Chair. Emma, thank you very much. Really great presentation. I have to say firsthand, I know at least 3 people have been saved by air ambulances, and certainly in the local area, and 2 of those in the farming community and a young child. First question, do you actually claim anything back from insurance companies? You said £135 sort of for the breathing equipment. So if you go to an RTC, is that something you claim back?
It isn't currently, but it is something that is being investigated in many ways to see if that's something that we can do.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, you mentioned new base. I used to seeing it used to be on the side of Whitton. Where have you moved to?
So we are now at Alconbury Weald in a purpose-built facility. So sadly, about 10 years ago, we were served notice at RAF Whitton because it was sold off for planning. So that's when the wheels started to get in motion to find ourselves a new home. It was not until about 4 or 5 years ago that we started really sort of pursuing that new base, because bless them, the new owners were like, you really have got to try to find a new home. So we got to the point we were renewing our lease there, if you like, every year. And so we started a campaign for approaching individuals rather than our supporters. Our supporters already raise £6 million a year for this service, and they do an amazing job. And we didn't want to go to them again and say, I don't suppose you could do an extra few more million, could you? Because they already do amazing things for us. So we started applying for bigger trusts and grants and foundations, and then looked at individuals to see if they could support that, and that is how the new place was funded. During that time, during that campaign and during the build, we were also served notice on our premises in Huntingdon as well, which was the old, I don't know if you know, the old Eakins, Dilly and Handley building. Everybody seems to know that one was there, but we were there, and that's where our head office was, and that was also sold off for development as well. So we really were being sort of attacked from both sides to say, you need to move out. So we were very lucky that it fell into how it did. And this new facility allows us to really take medicine forward for the next 50 years. So, for example, we have sleeping pods in there for the team. So the night shift, we actively encourage them to get rest in the night. So we have this facility for them. We have a family room so that engages families and individual patients as well, where they can come and talk about their incident. They can have their questions answered, and they can also really get to understand, you know, what has happened and how we can help them by signposting them to future places that can really help. So it's an amazing facility to be able to help those patients. We even have a donated gym equipment in there too, because our medics, they have to often, believe it or not, they have to run quite a distance with 20 kilo bags on their back and a 12 kilo monitor in their hands and so on. So these are heavy pieces of equipment they're taking to our patients. And patients aren't often conveniently right next to the car or right next to the helicopter. So there's often climbing over things, through things, under things and in things to be able to get to them. So they need to be physically fit, but also for their well-being. Apparently exercise, you know, brings out endorphins. I mean, I don't know. That's not me. But they, you know, they're all a very fit, healthy, conscious bunch, and to be able to look after their mental well-being as well as their physical well-being is important for that stamina for a long 12-hour plus shift. You know, the most incidents we had in one day was 13. So you can imagine back to back with heavy bags and moving and so on. So to keep them physically and emotionally strong is really important. And we also have, for this new build, you saw a brief bit of it there on the video, we have an immersive sim room. And this is incredible. So In this room, on 3 sides of the wall, you have projected images, moving images. It can be in the middle of a field, it could be in a London Underground, it could be on a beach, it could be in the back of an ambulance, but you get noise. Oh, and a disco. We've even got a disco programme for this place. And what that does is fully immerses the team into a simulation. So a bit like role-playing, I suppose, but with sophisticated mannequins that can breathe and bleed and talk and so on. And these environments allow them to have overwhelming noise and to have hustle and bustle and movement, motion behind them. And these are recorded. They've got microphones in there so you can hear and you can dictate things going on, and you can play videos back and watch what was being done. And, you know, have they walked into a disco scene, for example, and did they ask for the music to be turned off and the lights to be turned up? Silly things that we would take for granted, but there are things that they have to be able to do before they can start with the patient. And being able to experience this environment where there's overwhelming noise is able to give them, you know, it's as much about the environment that they're in as the medicine too, to make sure that everything is safe, everything is as it should be, so that they can do what they do best with the patient. And rooms like this can really help with that.
Thank you, Emma. It was well worth inviting you along. I do know obviously a lot of the work what you do both first hand, but I just thought it was really worth sharing and letting everybody see really what you guys do. So thank you very much, darling.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. And I would like to say that if, as a team, you would like to come up to the airbase and have a tour around and see what these things look like, you would be very welcome to do so. And I would arrange that with Tim if you would like to take advantage of that.
Thanks, Emma. I'm sure we'll be getting a list of names come flying at me soon. So I'm now going to move on to agenda item number 9, which is an update from North Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Care Partnership, John Rook. So, welcome, John. Thank you. So I'll now pass you over to John Rook to provide an update on the North Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Care Partnership. Thank you.
So thank you very much for inviting me to the committee. Thank you to Councillor Taylor for arranging it, and really keen to get your views on how we take forward this really important agenda. So my role in the North Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Care Partnership, I'm the Managing Director, and I work on behalf of the partners that make up this partnership covering Huntingdonshire, Fenland and Peterborough. And we are a collaboration of the NHS, local government, voluntary community and faith sectors coming together to take on big challenges. And one of our challenges we're talking to you about today is healthy weight and healthy eating, and trying to get the most impactful, effective plan we can for local residents, because we know how important it is to be at a healthy weight throughout your lifetime. So within your papers you'll see there's a background there, but the prime thing I really wanted to get your views on was, as we take forward this important agenda and we think about the public health challenges we face, was to get your views on what that plan should look like, who we should involve locally, and draw on the expertise within this committee to help us do that. So that when we do formulate a plan, and we're currently recruiting with the public health team from the County Council for someone to lead this important work, we've got the right plan to make the greatest impact, knowing how challenging it is in a developed country to keep your population at a healthy weight throughout their lifetimes, and the evidence to support sustained weight loss or healthy weight across that population is not strong. So we are looking and exploring ways in which we can encourage people to do the right thing and provide them with all the opportunities to do so. So within the pack I've put just a little bit of background to who we are. covering a range of different people from multiple different councils to 48 GP practices to NHS trusts and many hundreds of voluntary sector and charities. And one of the things we set out was healthy weight was one of the priorities we thought we could impact on, given the combination of people who represent us on our board. So some big employers, some important influential institutions, but with lots of reach into different communities, and particularly the neighbourhood infrastructure that we adopt to try and locally engage people and their communities, we feel will be powerful in this regard. So one of the things we put together was a early plan, which was depicted here to say these are the things that come with the best evidence we can find. But at the moment, this plan is pretty high level because we want to explore how best to execute it, to say, how do we maximise the number of children on free school meals, because we know there's evidence that improves the health of the child, all the way into how do we support people who have got diabetes to perhaps move away from their diabetes by adopting a low-calorie diet. So that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to think about response to children, younger people and adults. We're trying to think about how we do this, particularly with the prospect of healthier eating. And the discussion we've had with Councillor Taylor is how do we maximise the assets we have of all of this brilliant farmland around here to provide local produce to people in exchange for what we're increasingly reliant upon, which is ultra-processed foods, which we need to reverse. So that's what we're trying to achieve. That's who we are. I very much welcome the committee's views on ways in which you think we could work with local bodies, local agencies to try and answer some of these questions.
Yeah, thank you, John. As I know, you and I spoke several times, and I was at the seminar as well with you. But something what absolutely scared the life out of me was we know we've got a programme through this farming committee and working with Steve Barclay called the Feed Fenland with Fenland project. And that's where we're trying to get the schools and nursing homes to use local produced foodstuffs in them. And I actually visited a nursing home and went into the kitchen, and there was this chef pulling out the cottage pie for that day's lunch. So I just thought I'd fire the question in of, does she know locally where that meat came from, where those potatoes came from? And I was mortified with her answer. She said, I haven't got a clue. She said, it's all in here, look. And she lifted this big freezer lid up, and these cottage pies are in these big frozen trays. The chances are they're imported. She said, I'm not a chef, I'm a cook. She said, I haven't got a clue where that comes from. She said, but I'll just put it in the oven for 25 minutes and serve it. That frightened the life out of me. But then when you look around at what we've got available here, plus the huge amount of processed foods that's in the areas, people ask, why is real food so expensive? Flip the coin. Why is processed food so cheap? Surely there's got to be somehow we can put a project together here to get Feed Fenland with Fenland working. Get the schools, get the nursing homes, etc. on local produce within their kitchens. We know we've got the new, just before the general election, we got it through to where we're going to be putting venison, grey squirrel, wild bird on school menu meals. We know that is there. That went through Parliament just before the election. I honestly think now that's time to start and push that and start and use it. But we've got any other questions, guys?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the Chair has mentioned Steve Barclay's focus. I'm going to go back a few years to when I was a little girl, and we ate with the seasons. We were not fortunate to have freezers then, and I think it was a healthy way, and I think that education needs to come back in. I agree that certain produce is far more expensive, and why? Because you've got cheaper cuts of meat, possibly not meat, going into the food chain. I actually have had experience with a young man in foster care who actually picked up mad cow disease. It was horrendous. If anybody had seen that, it was far worse than rabies or anything like that. And it happened really quickly. And the reason was that he was fed processed food through foster homes and care homes. Maybe, I know they're scary things to discuss, but maybe those health issues need to be looked at. It's not just obesity, it's the other implications that you can have with health. But more to the point, I think it's also sad in our schools. I don't think enough tuition is given in the syllabus. We were taught how to cook, although we probably all grew up in, or certainly my age group, where you had to cook daily. The food was fresh and you lived off the land, be it pheasant, be it rabbit, hare, whatever. I don't agree with squirrels, but anyway. You know, there were cheaper cuts of meat, but they're still good. It's knowing how to cook brisket or shin of beef, those types of things. And I think we need more education in our schools. I do appreciate that parents and single parents have to go to work, probably haven't got the time. But certainly in Whittlesea, we had a programme where our food bank actually had an allotment, grew food, seasonal, and actually brought young mothers in and parents and children during the school holiday and teaching them how to cook. I know that's so small, but I think if we were to expand that and look at that in schools, so the training needs to be done from a very young age, and the education of why you need to eat healthily. And it isn't that costly. Certainly isn't that costly. And I think people run away with the fact of, you know, the cost of energy. I use a slow cooker. I cook 4 meals in that slow cooker, 3, you know, are frozen, 1 I eat at night. It's all about knowing about these things and education in itself. So that's what I feel about schooling, and whether we can attack it in that sort of way and bring more tuition into the schools about food, educating them how to cook it, which is important, and how to manage their time when they get home to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. I did make your comment about the squirrel, but I'm sure the red squirrel wouldn't agree with you, but there we go. Have we got any other questions? Councillor Marks.
It's more of a statement more than a question. I think a lot of it comes down to convenience. I think a lot of families now live day by day and at a fast pace of life. I think the other thing about it is, and seeing grandchildren, they won't try anything. And mum just says, well, don't worry, they go and have something else. Whereas when I was young, if you didn't eat it, you didn't get fed. And it was, and the other thing is what I was always told is, well, that will be brought out for tea tomorrow morning for breakfast until you do eat it. So, I mean, children these days don't seem to want to eat vegetables. They want chicken nuggets and chips, or fish fingers and chips. And that's really what their dietary needs seem to be. I don't know how you get around that, whether it's an education thing back at school, because we all used to eat school dinners, or a lot of us. So school dinners meant there were vegetables on your plate as well, which you ate, because everybody else ate them. I think nowadays that's all gone by the wayside. I don't know if that helps at all, but that's my observation.
So I think this is one of the things I would like to explore, actually, because we do have, through the councils involved in our partnership, we have some degree of control of what goes on in schools. You mentioned care homes, we have control of that as well. I think there's something about getting people excited about food, and really supported with the skills to do it. So we've been running some local cookery lessons because people have asked for them, and they proved to be successful. There's only been a handful of them so far. So we're looking to see, actually, can we expand that? And as part of that, what equipment do people need to enable it, whether it's a slow cooker or whether it's people got the right pots, pans, chopping boards, knives, and so on, to enable them to do what we'd prefer them to do. And then I think there is something about accessing some of the produce we have, instead of it driving all the way past to be processed somewhere else in the country and then brought back in an ultra-processed fashion. Doesn't seem like the best thing we could do for our carbon footprint, let alone for our diets. So we're really keen to explore how potentially we could get some local produce to food banks instead of ultra-processed foods, but also to some of these other care settings as well.
Thank you, Chair. I think also another thing is actually children being taken to where it comes from. I mean, I can't believe a lot of children don't even know milk comes from a cow, potatoes come out of the ground. And I think one of the things, I'm quite heavily involved at the minute with pumpkins for Halloween. Now, if you actually heard the amount that were wasted, it is, I mean, one of the pumpkin grow we deal with probably will move between 16, 17 million pumpkins. And I wouldn't think 100,000 of those will be used for pumpkin soup. They will go straight into recycling or in the dustbin or whatever. Now, if the children can actually see you can make pumpkin soup from what they've just carved out, maybe that's a help.
I'll come back on that. Yeah. No. Oh dear, red squirrels would be a delicacy. Joking apart, what you're saying about pumpkins, for instance, a lot of my family were born around Halloween, or my adopted family. So pumpkins, obviously, we use for the birthday celebrations. And again, with our mothers and our grandmothers, we were taught how to make pumpkin soup, pumpkin pie, that type of thing. And that's why I'm saying it's not just in the schools, it's the education at home. And picking up on your other point, exactly what I was going to say, you stole my thunder. Why can't it be part of the school's curriculum that they have these outings to farms? You know, it goes with domestic science, it goes with education as well. And very similar to you, Councillor Marks, I was brought up in a Barnardo's home, and you just ate one meal a day, what you could in my age group or those years ago. I'm not a fussy eater, but I like good food, and there is a difference. So I think it's very important. The education needs to be started very young, but I also feel that now times have changed. I mean, I spent time in the kitchen with my mother because I was very fortunate my adopted mother could be at home, and so was my grandma. So I was learning to cook at the age of, what, 9, 10, something like that. And I think, again, for the generations that have come along after me, they don't have that luxury of time. They probably haven't had the education, and I'm frightened to say this, so many marriages break up and family units, that they haven't got the money or the time to invest in the child in that way. You know, that they've got to feed them, they've probably got to get out to work. Time is the essence, but I do feel the crux of the matter is the education very early. But ideal. Local farms, look at us around here, we're Fenland. We grow potatoes, root vegetables. I mean, great. Why aren't we doing something about it and harnessing that and put that in the curriculum? Education, definitely.
Thank you, Councillor Laws, but I will just comment on one paragraph of your statement then about doing school visits to farms. We've actually looked at it. Insurance, no. Health and safety, won't allow it.
Okay, you take it to the school.
We've even, in the past, invited schools to come down during lambing season. And the teachers have gone, no thanks. We can't control all them random sheep. They'll see this little fluffy animal, want to go running towards it and go straight into the electric fencing. We can't correct them because there's no punishable correction allowed for the amount of teachers to the amount of kids what they've got there. It's just, everything seems to be completely out of order and health and safety mad. I would love, we've got projects on the go now to where we grow stuff at home in buckets, as I've explained to you before, John. We could take them into schools. But health and safety, what's in the buckets? Is there any sharp edges on the bucket? What's in the soil? Because this kid could be allergic to that or this and that. And it's an absolute nightmare trying to get into schools. I would love some help. The first person that got me into a school to try and show kids how easy it is to grow stuff at home, I'd pat them on the back because I come up against a brick wall every time I've tried.
I'll accept the challenge.
Challenge accepted, Councillor Laws. That one's on to you.
There's ways.
Councillor Count, go ahead, mate.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Just want to increase my knowledge rather than offer any suggestions here. There's a large section here on ultra-processed foods, and it seems to concentrate on the harms that they do. And the list are about snacks and things that are made in a factory out of chemicals. Almost no real food has gone into to make them. So it seems to be a certain category, and I was just wondering how the takeaway scene fed into this, because from another perspective, there's a lot of talk about takeaways being bad for you. I'm guessing in a lot of cases it's because of the amount of calories and the size of the portions. But when I think about a Chinese, there's virtually all fresh meat and veg that they cook from scratch with a bit of teriyaki or hoisin. Fish and chips, actual produce cooked from scratch with a bit of oil in there, fat, probably beef dripping in there. And the same goes for, the other takeaways. Perhaps the most processed one I would think would be a beef burger. The rest, I'm thinking they're raw ingredients. So is it a case of the ultra-processed from this document is probably at the most damaging sphere end of the environment, and then the next category, the takeaways, is because people haven't got the portions correct and the calories correct?
So I think that the issue with the ultra-processed foods is all the things that go into it. So all the different chemicals, preservatives, monosodium glutamate, whatever different types are applied, as well as the levels of salt as well. So the salt levels tend to be very high in takeaway food, which is obviously not good for one's blood pressure to have too much salt in the diet. And then I think there's something about the quality of ingredients. So particularly look at like the pizzas, the meat on pizzas is pretty much unrecognisable from anything you would have if you went to a butcher. So I think some of those again are laced with multiple different chemicals, preservatives. The meat content's not actually that high, and they put substitutes in for that too, and it's just known what's in them. So I think there are some exceptions. You can get very healthy takeaways, but on the whole, they tend to be high in fat, high in salt, because that's what we crave as greedy human beings.
Just to reply to one of your small comments, Councillor Count, I actually did a bit of research 2 years ago. Towards the end of COVID, was that if you visited every takeaway in March, you couldn't get round every takeaway in March and get a meal within a 28-day period. There's actually more takeaways in March than what there is days of the month. But one of the frightening things, as John's just mentioned about preservatives, one of the preservatives out there called monopropylene glycol, that goes into a lot of foodstuffs. And when the farmer grade is a little bit better than obviously what we call trade grade. But trade grade actually is a liquid, what they spray on aeroplanes to stop the aeroplane freezing when it's in the sky. And we're eating that. That's classed as a preservative in food as well. That makes you think when you hear things like that.
That was an interesting point you made. I didn't know that. Well, but I was just, I mean, I know a lot of preserves, obviously, but yeah, I didn't know that one. But moving back to obviously what you were saying, I think it was Jamie Oliver, wasn't it, that actually promoted do not put snack bars or fast foods. I mean, maybe that's something we can actually look at our review, because we're doing local plan at the moment. We can't ban, obviously, food outlets, but maybe we can actually put them in a reasonable distance from a school. And I think probably that's another thing, probably you can't change that. We were not allowed out of school. We had to eat school meals, but now they've got the freedom to come out at lunchtime, so they have a choice. So maybe if we look at our local plan, which we're doing at the moment, and think sensibly where any new takeaways, I mean, we can't change what has happened, but maybe any new ones that we can actually keep away from the school areas. So you've given me another thought there. Thank you.
One of the things I want to do around advertising is Peterborough City Council has made some quite stringent restrictions on advertising unhealthy foods on its displays, on buses and so on. And so we want to replicate that with the County Council as well. so that we are holding up a high line around advertising of some of these. I think the challenge I think people have faced when they've tried to limit the number of takeaways or fast food outlets is some of the firms that run them can be quite litigious and will have big legal departments, which will be a challenge for any council trying to hold that line. However, there are opportunities to say not here, near a school or near where children are going to be passing by, for example, so you can make some adjustments, but I think it's very difficult to rule out completely.
I think with the advertising restriction, I totally agree. I mean, you stand filling your car up with petrol and you actually stand looking at the nozzle and it's usually got an advert on there for a chocolate bar or something, and quite often you go in and subconsciously walk up to where the chocolate bars are, and it's amazing how, you know, the Kit Kats or whatever that were being advertised on have literally, you won't go to pick one up and it's probably the one that's sort of like not there or being sold at that point because they're already sold out. So I would agree with that. But also, I think for somebody like myself, you're on about flavoured drinks and we should go low-cal and all the rest of it. I hate to say it, I don't like NutraSweet and that horrible taste, saccharine type taste. So I think it's one of those things that it's going to be very difficult for sort of my age group to then go back down to a different type cola or whatever. Whereas the youngsters coming through, obviously they are getting the low-cal, so they don't actually know what proper Coke tastes like or Pepsi or whatever. So I think that's another thing you need to bear in mind, you know, an age group that is already used to one thing and just doesn't like another.
And I think we are expecting some more national legislation on unhealthy drinks and unhealthy food, and particularly national advertising standards as well, which will help us with this. Is what we could do locally as well. I think which will add to that, and recognise that, you know, there are some things that we prefer. We just need to consume in moderation, and that's what it's about. Is not policing how people choose to live their lives, but providing them with enough information to improve the number of healthy alternatives that people consider.
Can I just make one comment to Councillor Mark? You're a marketing absolute hero. They love people like you falling for advertisements. Good sales bits. Food banks. Are you in touch with them and you work with them, do you, locally?
Yeah, so we've got good connections with the food banks on the basis of a lot of the people we support. So some of the work we're doing in Fenland around what we call the early help hub, a lot of people end up accessing food banks as a result of poverty, or so we have good connections with them anyway because we send a lot of business. One of the things we'd like to consider with this is, rather than someone pick up a can of processed soup when they go to the food bank, can we give them a bag of vegetables? Could we make that available? And there was something mentioned about actually food banks having their own allotment. That'd be brilliant, but you know, how would we support them accessing local produce that, you know, may in some cases go to waste because it doesn't fit the standards the supermarkets want, but would be, you know, if supported with the right equipment and skills to use it, would be a much better alternative.
I'll come in on you, Councillor Matt. So I'm just thinking about that question. The amount of people that we've got round us that grow the vegetables, there is so much what we call stock feed available. Surely there's got to be some of that available somehow to push in to various different places. And I know that's what you're coming in at as well, I think, but go ahead.
I think, yeah, that's part and parcel, going into a lot of these pack houses and seeing the waste because the carrot's not straight or the potatoes isn't right or whatever. But one thing I would say, and it goes back a number of years when I actually found my sister had bought 4 baking potatoes for £2.25 when you could buy a bag of potatoes for £5. And I went absolutely ballistic, bearing in mind my farming stock, and like, what the hell did you do that for? And her comment was, because they were washed. And that goes in society today because people need things that are quick, and equally, the way that people now know food is usually served is when it goes ping in the microwave. You know, it's not from the old days of where things were put in the oven and it was all the rest of it. It's now, you know, life moves on. So that, I think you're going to somehow have to get around that as a major problem.
I am covering that, Charlie, on my YouTube and social medias because I walked around various supermarkets the other week, and you just cannot find dirty vegetables in a supermarket at all. They've all got. I had one woman come round the house a couple of years ago wanting a bag of taters, and she brought them back the next day. She wanted the ones that come out the ground clean. They're just different, but they're not. They don't come out the ground clean. You know, they've been washed. They won't last. Yeah, no, I don't want them. They're too dirty. And when you're up to, yeah, the farmer himself has got to try and educate the public, which then can educate the school. But where do you start with Point Daft? And I really don't know the way forward properly.
Would it be possible to come back and talk to you again about how we're progressing with this and get any further feedback you have? Really keen to try and make an impact, try and explore new techniques and maybe retry some old ones as well.
Yeah, we have a meeting once every 5 years.
Sorry about this, I've just had another thought as I'm sitting here. With the food banks, you know, it's a voluntary based thing. And if they're supplying vegetables, which you're saying, and obviously to use soups, I mean, there are other things they can do that is a lot cheaper, you know that. Have you thought about just actually putting together some photocopy recipes? Is that being done? I haven't seen it at our food bank, I've got to say.
So we haven't rolled out yet, but some of the cookery skills have said, actually, can you equip me with, you know, as I mentioned, the equipment, but also the recipes? And as if you could do that alongside it, it's very easy to do.
The other thing I was going to ask, because something I use very quickly, because trust me, when you're a counsellor, you get home at all hours, but obviously a slow cooker can cook safely through the day. But another thing is, I don't know if you've seen these water jugs now, where you can cook pasta in less than a few minutes. Have you seen them? And I don't know, because you can do broccoli, vegetables very quickly. You don't have to use a cooker. And I mean, I've got to say pasta, I use that as a cheat. But I've already done my sauces there in the freezer. So guilty of pinging the microwave for that. What I'm trying to say is there money available to actually supply that type of equipment to people?
So there is some money available, and the public health team have set aside a budget to support this. But there's also people who are happy to donate equipment as well, who will be working with. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of requests coming in, like, can you teach me how to cook with an air fryer? Can you new ways of doing it? And I think we want to be as helpful as possible with that.
Thank you very much, John. But yes, of course, you're welcome back, and see where we've gone from there. So on, that's the one. So yeah, there's what I want about, yeah. So agenda item number 10 is an update from Eastern Powerhouse, and James Palmer, please. So I shall now pass over to James for an update on the Eastern Powerhouse project.
Thank you. I don't know how much that one. Yeah. I don't know how much people know about the Eastern Powerhouse, but I think it'd probably be wise if I sort of gave you a from the beginning, sort of why we set up Eastern Powerhouse and where we are and what we do. Really, I think it'd be probably quite useful to you. So. As you know, I had 4 years in the privileged position as mayor, and I worked very closely with mayors across the country. And at the time, there were only 8, we were called metro mayors, although I was the only mayor without a metropolitan area. And it was very clear to me that all the other mayors had government-funded bodies that were backing growth in their local patches. So you had the Northern Powerhouse, Midlands Engine, Western Gateway, London Corporation. All of these independent bodies were politically neutral, but when mayors were promoting schemes that would grow the economy in their patch, they would be backing their mayor and making sure that government was heavily lobbied in favour of investment into their part of the country. The East of England had nothing funded by government that was doing that at all, and still has nothing funded by government that does that. There are versions of the Northern Powerhouse in virtually every other part of the country. Of course, we have devolved governments in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, each of which has less population than the East of England. The East of England pays into the Treasury. It's only one of 3 parts of the entire UK that pays into the Treasury, London and the South East being the other 2. As you all know from members of Fenland, that the general premise is that government ignores the East of England, whichever colour of government is in power. I always used to say the Tories never invest in the East because everybody votes Conservative anyway, and Labour never invest in the East because everybody votes Conservative anyway. But, of course, the last election has proved that completely wrong. So we now have the majority of MPs, or sorry, the largest group of MPs in the East is Labour, most of whom are on very, very skimpy majorities. So maybe for the first time, we will have a government that looks at the East of England as something worth investing in. But it is very, very difficult because the way the civil service is set up, it means that the East is not primary in the objectives of the civil service, and the civil service, in my experience, is the absolute power broker of government and completely controls the way government spending has happened and happens. And we only have to look at Ely North Junction as an example of the power of the civil service over ministers. I think Ely North Junction has been announced probably 2 or 3 times as funded by various ministers, including the last Minister, Secretary of State for Transport, Mark Harper, who we lobbied heavily, and he agreed to fund Ely North Junction. However, the directive to fund it never reached Network Rail, and the information that I have is that the senior civil servant in the Department for Transport is absolutely never going to sanction funding of Ely North Junction. Why this occurs is because the main reason is because the government, the civil service in particular, understands agglomeration, and we do not have a major city in the East of England, and therefore there is no model for them to work to for investment into our region. So given that background and that understanding that I have from the privileged position that I had for 4 years of working at ministerial level in government, or working alongside ministers in government, it seemed to me of extreme importance that the East of England galvanised itself and formed a body that was able to lobby centrally and consistently in favour of the East of England. We are entirely independent. We have member councils from the left and the right. Our members, businesses and education providers, councils join us because of our political independence. I am no longer a member of the party that I stood for, the Conservative Party, because I believe as chairman it is extraordinarily important that independence of the Eastern Powerhouse is transparent. And our job is to get down into Whitehall, into Westminster, and promote this great region for investment. And we do that on a daily basis. We do put on events as well, and we released a manifesto for the East during the election period. All of this is on our website, by the way. Yeah, so we spend a lot of time trying to get government to understand just what the opportunities are here in the East, and just what we could achieve in the East over and above the levels that we work at now. And you might say, well, government will look at us and we're the 3rd strongest payer to the Treasury. Why does government need to invest? But in actual fact, if we were levelled up with London and the South East, or levelled up with the South East in particular, government would probably see boost in the economy in the GVA of the East of England, we estimate that to be £50 billion per annum, which would mean the government itself, Treasury, would get around £12+ billion per annum, which is the foreign aid budget, or goes a long way, I would suggest, to a certain black hole that we hear a lot about. So this isn't just, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a few quid? There's actual tangible evidence as to why government should invest in the East of England. In actual fact, what we've shown through our research and the work we've done as an organisation is that the investment in the East of England provides more return, actually, than investment in almost any other part of the country. It's very difficult to change the narrative of the way the system works. You have got to get your evidence base strong, and you've got to get it right. And we're working with our hands tied behind our back because the government already fund other parts of the country to be ahead of the East of England. For example, Steve will remember, and John will remember, the independent economic review for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough that we carried out when I was mayor. However, government have funded independent economic reviews for the whole of the North, for the whole of the Midlands. The government understands exactly where it needs to invest because of the work it has done. It has been able to target businesses that need investment in the North where they are strong and make them stronger, and also in the Midlands. It hasn't carried that work. It refuses steadfast so far to carry out that work in the East of England. Why? Well, I think I could talk to you privately probably about the reasons I think why, but there is a certain powerful organisation based not that far from here that has an awful lot of say into how money is invested into the East. But these things matter. When it comes to levelling up, you might say, well, the Fens did okay in levelling up. But the East of England as a whole got £360 million investment in levelling up. Scotland, smaller population, got £1.5 billion. There is a disparity. We are the second least funded part of the entire country. And you will also know, as good Fenland members, that deprivation in the East is a real reality. It exists. Not everybody is riding around in Range Rovers and extraordinarily wealthy. So putting that point across constantly to government, asking them why there is no energy policy for the East, there is no agri-tech policy for the East, there is no life science policy for the East, there are no policies effectively that are bespoke for the East. Should we accept the fact that the M11 stops at Cambridge, or that the A120 is appallingly underserved for the quality of needed, or that the A12, which should be a motorway from Lowestoft to London, is an appalling mess, or that the A47, poignant here, is a death trap that government simply will not deal with. Of course we shouldn't accept these things. It's absolutely wrong that we should sit back and quietly allow other parts of the country to get more funding and more interest than we do. So the reason the Eastern Powerhouse exists is entirely that, to put a coherent argument as to why we should gain investment for our part of the country. And I know Fenland has been a member before. Fenland is not a member at the moment, but we would love them to rejoin, love you to rejoin, because unless we work together across councils and across businesses and across the whole of the East, this situation will continue ad infinitum. And the East has never been very good at presenting itself as a single interconnected region, which is exactly what it is. The government recognise, I think, 9 regions in England, one of which is the East of England. That's Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Cambridgeshire and Bedfordshire. That's the nominated government region of the East. Does that matter? Well, yeah, it does, because that's how your funding is given out. Funding is given out on a regional basis. So it does matter that we work together. Steve will remember from when we did the work on the devolution deal with Norfolk, Suffolk and Cambridgeshire, and the word from government at the time was, we get a cacophony of voices from the East, we don't get a single voice. Of course, that devolution deal didn't happen, and government still continued to have a cacophony of voices, and still does. It's until we realise that by working as one, that we're all stronger, I think we will continue to be in the malaise that we're in. So that's why we exist. We exist for you, to use to put forward ideas to government. We have a new government. At the moment, there all is. I'll be honest and say we really struggled with the previous Tory government. They were not interested at all in the east of England, it seemed to me, despite the fact that many of them were senior cabinet members from this part of the world. But Labour have come into power without a vast amount of policy ideas, and they're being very open about that. They're writing to organisations like ourselves saying, what do you feel we should do? Where could we make a difference? So we're engaging, as you would expect, with the new Labour government. We were at the Labour conference just a couple of weeks ago, where there were a number of functions and MPs were involved in discussions that we had, and of course we will continue to put policy ideas to government. And ultimately, as we know, most policies are not decidedly left or right. They're either good policies for the East of England or they're not policies for the East of England. Somebody once told me, and I've quoted it many times, there is no Tory or Labour way to build a road. You either build the road or you don't build the road. That's where we are. And the frustration with the A47 that I had as mayor, meeting with the head of Highways England at the time, was that the A47 was number 2 on Highways England's list for development as a dual carriageway, but it was something like number 19 on government's list for development as a dual carriageway. So it's trying to get the reality is what's needed here into that Department for Transport list, into that Department for Energy list, into that Department for Agriculture, whatever it may be. So that's the premise of what we're trying to do as a Western Powerhouse. I think you probably, Chairman, you want me to talk about the reservoirs plan that we've been discussing as well. So after meeting a few people over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, I wrote an article sometime early this year that I think has been sent to all the members of Fenland District Council. Certainly I sent it to the Chairman and it's probably followed. So basically it's talking about the amount of water that's pumped into the North Sea via St Germans. It's difficult to ascertain exactly how much that is. In a very wet winter it can be upwards of 4 Rutland waters that are pumped directly out into the North Sea. And of course we are living in the driest part of the UK, and water scarcity is an issue for our times, and an issue that negatively impacts not just on the farming community, but also on individual households, but also on the growth of the region itself. And we will know, on one hand, government is saying we want to build 8 million houses in Cambridge, or 100,000, or whatever it is this week, but it's a lot. On the other hand, the government can't build any houses in Cambridge unless they deliver water to South Cambs. But more importantly, from a Fenland situation, it's about, in my view, protecting and controlling an extraordinarily vital infrastructure, and understanding what you can do as a local authority to be proactive in creating water storage. So we're working at the moment with yourselves and with East Cambs to look at a proposal to government. That proposal's a pretty simple one. Of course, as Fenland District Councils, you will know, you control planning permission for reservoirs normal reservoirs on farms, and farmers across the Fens are very well versed in understanding how to fill reservoirs on their land. A standard reservoir, and there might be somebody who knows a lot more about this than I do, but I believe is about 250 cubic metres of water. If we were to put a network of reservoirs across the Fens next to the drainage system, pumped water into them during the winter months when the wash is full, as I noticed today when I drove over, the wash is very full at the moment. We're hardly into the winter. That would allow storage of water across, say, 100 reservoirs that would give us around 25 million if my maths is correct, 25 million cubic metres of water, which is about half the capacity of Grafham Water. So it's not an insubstantial offer. Now, the cost of building the reservoir at Chatteris, which I know some of you are really in favour of and some of you are not, as is the political world, is estimated anything between 2.5 and 8 billion, depending on which person you're talking to on any particular given day. If we estimate similarly that these reservoirs cost between 650,000 and £1 million each, that allows us to suggest that for around 100 million quid, the government could within a 2-year period, because that's how long it takes to build these things, actually deliver within this 5-year cycle, could deliver significant amount of water storage to the east of England immediately, in government terms immediately, for around 100 million quid. So this is not pie in the sky, this is absolutely within government terms affordable. But of course, more than that, over any of that, it allows you as a local authority to take control of a significant part of your infrastructure. Now, how far beyond just storage we go, how much of that is just for the agricultural world, how much of that would need to be linked into a potential water purification and a water system in the east of England, well, that would be part of the work that we carry out. How far do we go with this? What opportunity do we take to see if this is something that that actually could go further than just storage? And that's something that we would look at, of course, over the course of time during putting the proposals to government. But in essence, that's the premise. We create, through the fence, a network of reservoirs alongside the drains that already exist. We fill those up, and we then have a vast amount of water available to put back into the system when there is a time of crisis. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it, Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions, of course.
So thank you, James. So I did do the quick figures because obviously me and you spoke the other week and decided to put things together. What we're actually talking is 100 farms to have a 20-acre reservoir, and that will give us the same amount of water capacity as what the reservoir at Chatteris is going to be holding. That's 4,500 acre of land altogether, but they're looking at 2,000 acre of it being res. If this was distributed about around Fenland or around Cambridgeshire next to the waterways, to me there is so many miles in this project. It is council laws. It's happening in Whittlesea now, through one, as you know, but they only use their water for irrigation. They offer middle level a free water dump and water storage area for the winter, and then they use it themselves to irrigate with in the summer. I honestly think this project really could fly. I think the Chatteris one is in the wrong location, but if it's to get 100 farms going to put 20 acres in, that's your 2,000 acre reservoir. I think people would jump at that.
Yeah, I mean, so just to clarify on the Chatteris reservoir, so Anglian Water are a member of the Eastern Powerhouse. They're very keen to see this happen. As I mentioned, previously Michael Gove, now Angela Rayner, they will both support this. This is the case of Cambridge I'm talking about. But this isn't something that's come from Michael Gove. This has come from the colleges in Cambridge directly into Whitehall. This is how lobbying works. The colleges want the case for Cambridge because they can build on the Greenbelt and make a lot of money. So that's the premise. So Labour will support this because they will be advised to do so. But, so I've stood and seen Michael Gove speak to the case for Cambridge when he announced it and speak about how many hundreds of thousands of homes they're going to build, and also had Anglian Water in my ear saying they can't build any until we build a new reservoir in Chatteris. We got a meeting between ourselves, Anglian Water, and senior civil servants to discuss the timescale of Chatteris, and my opinion was that the likelihood of that being developed before 2040 was minimal. There was no energy whatsoever from the civil servants that I engage with to see this through. And of course, it is exactly the same department that's promoting the case of Cambridge. So you've got, as so often happens, Minister saying one thing and the wheel turning at a different pace. So this is us being proactive, you being proactive, East Camps being proactive.
Thank you. We seem to be having a lot of crossed messages here, I feel, regarding the reservoir. We're hearing on one side up to 2040. You know, the other, we've sat in meetings with the chair and myself. We're on an AW liaison group, and we're hearing different things they are saying as well. One of my biggest concerns is, and Anglian Water were very, very careful in what they said when pressed, a lot of this water is not just for Cambridge. It's going to go further into the home counties, and they need that quantity of water. So coming up with a solution for half, I can understand in one way, and yes, if it's only going to feed Cambridge, but with it's already worked out, the network that they have is going to go further afield. So where are we going to put the other half of these reservoirs? Because we're now going to be taking up more land, so we're going to take more out of food production, and this is a rural committee. And the other thing about it is we then have all the add-ons of things like the maize, which we're taking over a lot of the land with, and also glass farms. We've got that one just going out to Soham as well. We're soon going to be not a rural community because we're not going to have anything to grow because we're going to have no land to do that. So my concern is, from what you're saying, and I can understand in one way, but we seem to be turning to bigger businesses, i.e. we're now going to be producing power and more power with maize and the glass farm, and now water that we're going to be sending elsewhere. So we're not going to be this rural community.
I could talk to you about my time in agriculture and growing up in a town where there were probably 20 farmers like myself, my family, who were farming under 200 acres, none of which exist now, and they've all been absorbed effectively into one mega farm. The rural community of the Fens has become agribusiness over the last 40 years or so. That is a statement of fact. It's not a statement of, and you will know, sitting in this room, that many of you lived in March all your life, and you will know how the Fens have changed from effectively being farming the industry that supported many other industries, and that just doesn't happen that way now. So whilst I agree with your statement to an extent, I think that we're looking at a problem that's real now, that's realistic now. This idea for a group of reservoirs across the Fens is not to replace the Fenland Reservoir, but it's to allow you to be proactive in the current situation and take away the sort of timeline issue with protecting water. The public at the moment are not getting angry about billions of gallons of water being pumped into the North Sea every year, but it would only take a couple of dry summers and the hose pipes to be turned off that you guys would be feeling it in the neck because you hadn't planned ahead when you potentially could have done. That's not a threat, by the way. I'm just, being in your position, I know how you have to answer to the immediacy of situations. So I think your point about taking 2,000 acres of land out of agricultural use is a valid one. However, the point you made about glass houses and maize, and you could say solar farms as well, all these things are on the table because farmers can't make money out of agricultural land. So, if you are a farmer and you're struggling to make money, you will turn to the options that are there that give you hard currency. And maize is one, of course. Solar panels are another, and glass houses are another. Turf is another. We could go on. farmers are businessmen, they've got to make money. It's very, very hard. And but what will never disappear, where the east of England, where the Fens have their advantage above other parts of the UK, is that we have this incredible network of drainage, which is also a network of water supply to allow the farms to make the most out of the land that they have.
Yeah, go on, Casper, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. However, knowing the local farming community being brought up around here, one of the biggest thing has always been that a lot of the farmers, especially 40 foot, that sort of direction, who were next door to a riverbank, could not have an extraction licence because they were always told by the IDB or by the middle level there wasn't enough water to come down. So suddenly we're going to all now start filling up 2,000 acres worth. And so these farmers are also going to sit there and say, well, if we can do this now, why couldn't we do it then? Number two, if we've got this water, surely we can use it on our own land before we actually start sending it down to the home counties. Wholeheartedly understand, you know, where you are coming from, and I do support the idea of having smaller reservoirs. However, I can see that there's a conflict of interest with this, and especially having just driven in here today and working literally across the road from where the proposed site is, I can't believe that Anglian Water will have up to 60 guys standing in a field, and today they've got machinery in there already, they're doing inspections and everything else. And we're hearing from 2 billion to 8 billion. That seems to be a movable feast on the day. Somebody somewhere surely has already made some sort of decision, because there's already notices been put out to properties and farms and people losing their livelihood.
Yeah, look, as I said, this is obviously an ongoing project before I got, you know, the major reservoir was an ongoing project before I was involved in it. My involvement purely is because Anglian Water asked us to help them liaise more with government, and that liaison ended up in a brick wall. Of course, government have asked Anglian Water to explore the possibility of delivering a reservoir, and there is money somewhere within government coffers to deliver infrastructure in water. There's no doubt about that. And of course, they have to do the feasibility work in order to take it to government to get you know how these things work as they do. I'm being brutally honest, in the meetings that I've had with the civil service, there does not seem to be an understanding of the need or the timeline necessary to deliver a major reservoir here. I'm not saying they won't deliver a major reservoir here. I just don't think there's an understanding of the timeline. And as I said, what can you do about it as a local authority? In many ways, planning authorities, district councils, you've got your hands tied behind your back. There's not a lot you can do about anything. You know, when it comes to national infrastructure, you are subservient to the larger authorities. In this case, you're absolutely not subservient to the larger authorities. You know, if you want to pass a reservoir on a piece of land next to a Fenland drain, that's a decision for the planning committee in this authority. Obviously, what by IDBs and what, I can't totally understand that. But it's your decision. If you want to promote across with yourselves and East Cambs 100 of these or 150 or whatever, that's within your gift to do so. And it is one of the rare occasions where you can take a national lead.
So what I would like to see on this, I would like to see these replace the main one, because I think that is going to be a major flood risk for Chatteris Swamp. It's just not ringing true to me to be in the right area for safety at all. But if we could replace it by these, that, as Councillor Mark said, taking out more farmland, but would there be a potential to replace the SFIs with this? That if you've got a farmer that's got 20 acre of old dodgy land that's as heavy as hell and don't plough very well and grows terrible, could that be his reservoir area?
I will, if I could respond to that, I'll come back to Home Fen. Home Fen is probably one of the most fertile parts of this whole area. Yet we've seen, or somebody has seen fit, to flood it and put a few cows on it, whereas that was producing 3 crops every 2 years of good return, carrots, stuff like that, which you can't now grow around Chatteris because most of the land is carrot sick. Surely we should be keeping that type land, and instead of putting reservoirs, glass farms, solar farms, everything else, and we should be supporting that. We are a rural committee, and that's what I thought that our remit should be, more than trying to judge whether we should be putting a huge water course. And bear in mind also, you see how much the Fens have shrunk over the years. You know, most people in the Fens don't even know where Home Post is. I always say to them, go and have a look at Home Post, then come back and tell me about the Fens, because you'll actually understand it then. That's why the roads are so bumpy. That's why, you know, a lot of stuff goes on within the Fens. And I'm sorry, that's my view. And I go back to a lot of farmers over the years have wanted to irrigate. They've wanted to put these reservoirs in. And there's been middle level going like, no, there is not the water supply and all the rest of it. Now, all of a sudden, that seems to have gone by the wayside.
Councillor Count, yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and lovely to see you again, James. I was really interested in the whole presentation, not just a bit about the reservoir, and I think you're absolutely right. The East of England has been ignored for far too long, and that's probably because we don't have a substantial business voice behind us that government's forced to listen to. So I really applaud your efforts in that direction. On the reservoir itself, I read the note that was sent around before, and I was trying to get my head around it. It sounded really interesting. I do agree with Charlie, and I think you commented it's probably true anyway. We're going to get a reservoir, and we probably won't get much say in it. And my journey along that route has not been to oppose the reservoir, but to say we get the reservoir we want. And I think there's a big difference between somebody coming along and saying, here's a reservoir where you could have water sports, where you could have this, you could have a facility, you could have curved edges instead of straight ones, you could have some shielding for your bank, to them actually getting to the last bit and saying, yeah, but somebody's got to find the money for that. So all along I was saying, yeah, well, if you make it nice, if you make it that, then you'll get local support. So that's where I've been with the reservoir. But I think what's really interesting about what James has put forward today, it sounds very feasible to me. I've no idea about the taking land out and whether you can fill it up from the drains, but it seems feasible to me, not in the fact that it may replace the reservoir, because I think that horse is pretty well bolted, but it would accelerate the delivery of water where we need it. And we don't need the water in 2040, we need the water now. Alconbury Weald was stalled over water, and that was 15 years ago. And it's taken them this long to realise that the whole of Cambridgeshire has come to a standstill for building because of water, not because of bricks or bricklayers, because of water. Chelmsford is going off to Chelmsford, the water is, as well as the home counties. You know, it's a real big problem. And I think that as part, you said it's in a certain stage and it needs to move forward. I think as part of that moving forward, I'd love to see more detail, but also see how a hybrid approach to accelerate delivery. So you might not get the 1,200 cubic farms, but if you put something to government saying, 100, that we could deliver 40 in a 2-year time period, that would enable you to have this. That would be really good. And for the farmers, I know those conversations. Farmers are sat out there with their crops dry in the field when they desperately needed water, and there's a water course nearby and they're not allowed to use it. If we have these reservoirs, the smaller reservoirs, which we've put in some of the places, then they get the periods of time when they can use it absolutely for that, and then refill it when the water's flowing. So I think it's got legs, I absolutely do, and I think I'd like to see it go to the next stage to see how solid those legs are and see if it will move forward. Going back to the Eastern Powerhouse, yeah, fully on board. I think that we need to unite as a voice. You know, Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Bedfordshire, we have to have a voice. Yes, Cambridgeshire overlaps the other way as well, but we have to make a decision which voice we're in and have a voice in the other camp as well. And realistically, we're in East Anglia. I've only got one question for you, and really, from the Eastern Powerhouse and the evidence you're putting forward together, and that is government funding will come based on evidence. You said that about strong evidence. What are the big projects for East Anglia? Don't need to sugarcoat it and pretend it's all in Finland. You know, we're adults. What are the big projects in the region that you represent that have got the strongest BCRs that you're saying, listen, government, if you're going to do 3 things, it's got to be these 3?
Yeah, so the strongest BCR and the most important project to the entire region is Ealing Junction. that affects people in Peterborough, Ipswich, Norwich, Cambridge, the Fens, whatever, all over. And it's a no-brainer. It's so obvious. And in all of these things, when you talk of major infrastructure across the entirety of the UK, £500 million is neither here nor there. You know, this is vast amounts of money to everyday people, but it's not when it comes to major infrastructure. It should be done. It should have been done 20 years ago. It's a massive scar on the east of England if it isn't done, and it negatively impacts on all of us. From your perspective, right here, you would have later trains and more regular trains on the Peterborough to Ipswich line, which would make a massive difference to all of you, of course. The A47, I mean, how long has the A47 been lobbied for? You know, as I said, the BCR on the A47 is pretty strong. It's a good, strong project. Highways England have it, well, certainly when I was mayor, in the top 2 of projects that need to be delivered. If the A47 was anywhere else in the UK, it would be a motorway and it would have been done 30 years ago. It is scandalous that it isn't done. And this is the madness of this whole situation, this region that we live in. Into energy on the North Sea coast has been in the region of £130 billion over the last 20 years. Yet there is no motorway between Lowestoft and the manufacturing heartland of the Midlands. I mean, the mind boggles of what kind of government we have or have had that just can't sort out an issue like that. Equally, I would make the same case for the A12. The A12 is an absolutely scandalously bad road. It goes through high density populations in Essex. It's appalling. Its main link from Ipswich and Lowestoft, of course, Ipswich into London, and it is absolutely dreadful. The other big one is the railways as a whole. We have an excellent railway network, but it's slow. It is criminally slow. It's much easier, and Steve will know this, it's much easier to upgrade existing infrastructure than it is to put new infrastructure in. I'm still in slight doubt, or significant doubt, that the East-West Rail will ever be built because the BCR is so appalling on it. 12 billion quid for a very short piece of railway doesn't seem to be the best investment possible. It will probably get through because that Oxford-Cambridge lobbying link is there. But if it was anywhere else, it wouldn't. But my goodness me, take that £12 billion and invest it into the railway network we already have, then you would see some significant transformation, because you could get trains down and more train journeys down and more regular journeys. And Steve and I lobbied heavily with cross-country trains and useless Secretary of States at the time who just couldn't understand the importance of that railway line between Stansted and Birmingham, the importance of it to the Fens. Maine is 28 minutes from Cambridge North, so it's 28 minutes from the Science Park. You can buy a house in Maine for £1 million less than you can in Cambridge. You can't live in Maine and commute to Cambridge North Station. And the trains go through, but they won't bloody stop them. And this is the kind of nonsense that any government could sort out, any Secretary of State could just do that and sort it out. So, you know, should we be greedy for the east of England? Yes, we should be damn well greedy, because we've sat back and seen investment that could have been here go elsewhere over many decades. I'm pretty fed up with it, to be honest with you. So I think I gave you 4, maybe 5, Steve, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, James. I couldn't agree with anything more than what you've just said. And I certainly remember both of our blood boiling at many of those meetings with Network Rail. The intransigence, you know, the book says no. There's just obstacles instead of solutions. The one thing I just wanted to highlight is the next hurdle we're going to have. We're building Cambridge South at the moment at Addenbrooke's. I'm not building it. The people who are building it are building it. And I'm no longer in the loop. But what absolutely terrifies me is the mistake of Cambridge North happening at Cambridge South. We still can't get a timetable that tells us what's going to land there. And I think when they build it, so it should be you go from Whittlesea, March, Mainey into Cambridge, out the other side, straight into Addenbrooke's. And I'm terrified that when they finish, they'll say, yeah, but the trains can't stop there.
Goes to Christmas parts, but Network Rail is a strange beast I have a lot of dealings with. And you have top layer management that really want to do stuff to build the railway out. And then you have a layer in the middle here, which is the people who deal with timetables, and they are the computer says no comes. And they won't change anything because it might need a little bit of extra work for them to sort things out. So it's a bit, it's fun to be here. Let's see why 180 is still having the same conversation. So just before I leave you, say this to the committee, your leader and the leader of these.
Forgetting that. Sorry, I think I talked loud enough anyway. What I was going to say, has there been a reason that we've somehow disconnected from Fenland to the Eastern Powerhouse?
I don't think so. I think it's just lapsed. I hope it's just lapsed.
Right.
So any word that could be said to unlapse that would be very favourable.
Well,
as I said, we don't have the luxury that other powerhouses have of having £1.5 million a year funding from government. All of our funding is from our members, and that's the only way we exist. So we operate on a particularly tight shoestring. So having Fenland back in the door would be really wonderful.
Well, I mean, as I say, I won't go over it. I know Charlie wants to come in and time is pressing for everyone. But, I mean, our strength would be teamwork. Our strength would be bringing all these things together. Now, as we were explained earlier, and I don't know, James, if you heard that, we're only a committee, we can only recommend. So I would propose at this committee that it's brought forward to Cabinet. And that's what we need to do as our first stage from this committee. I don't know if members are in agreement. But I'd also just like to throw into the mix, yes, I agree with the reservoirs, but also I am desperate to see Ely Junction. I mean, you know, we have an opportunity to open up economy, west to east, east to west, whatever. But the point is that is holding us back. And here we are with, whether you're Conservative or Labour, who's in government, promoting public transport. How can you possibly promote it when, for instance, Whittlesea, we can't get an extended platform, we can only have 2-carriage trains stopping, and I've used that service, and I do try and use it, but it's ridiculous. So my thoughts would not only be for the reservoirs, which I'm very supportive of that project, but it was also for striving to get the Ely Junction done. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. One thing I will say is, as Mayor, you've very kindly got us a car park at Meaney. What's really, really sad is now, it's a beautiful car park, but because the trains don't stop, although the uptake is going more and more vehicles now, and we've now got overnight parking, so it's been picked up. Absolutely brilliant, you know, and full credit to you. And going forward, I'm sure it will help you know, mainly, not only Mainey grow, but the surrounding areas like Welney and places like that as well. And it's nice, it's a bit refreshing to sit here and hear that somebody's actually fighting for Fenland regarding monies to come into us, and especially for industry as well. We've got the economic growth team sitting there, and I know the conversations I have, not day after day, but time after time, and we've had it again today, there just doesn't seem to be the money coming back for companies to expand. There are different companies out there, and we've got a whole raft of companies, from aero companies, food processing companies. We've got all of those, but we just don't seem to be able to do anything. And then in the next breath, one of my customers is just moving out of Wisbech to go to Lincolnshire because they're being told, "Oh, come to Lincolnshire, we can do this, this, and this for you." And it's so frustrating, and it must be for the team, the economic growth team as well. So I will support anything that brings growth back in, especially business growth. That I think is critical to making Fenland better.
Councillor Laws, can I just ask you to repeat what you wanted to go to Cabinet? Please.
Thing. I forgot we've got an antiquated system in Finland, but anyway, what I would like to propose, and as you know I'm a Cabinet member, is that we bring forward to Cabinet to actually exploring to rejoin the Eastern Powerhouse. I have no idea why it's lapsed, and for two reasons, to explore the reservoir issue we've discussed, and also I'll also put on the table the Ely Junction as well, if I may.
Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Could we just add something to that as well, and also to help economic growth with businesses and everything as well? I'm happy to second that.
Just to be clear to members, we'll make sure that that recommendation is put through to Cabinet and we'll write a report accordingly. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I do have to go. Great to see you, Jane.
Take James's point that, to get 100 reservoirs, but we all know to link 100 reservoirs, to have a main reservoir, to have filtering positions, to have pumps to get the water to the right place. I think for me, I would like to see Anglian Water brought to this committee to see that Anglian Water are a partner, but to just get their feel of where that system fits in with the reservoir and have a better understanding for me to make an informed decision.
I completely agree with that, Councillor Clark, but what I would like to see first is Anglian Water actually knowing, or getting to know what they're actually doing, to tell us what they're doing to be right before we can join them together with somebody else, because the stories are just so, they're all over each, yeah, I mean, the last I heard, what we got told at the last meeting, Councillor Marks, was they are getting pressure on them to have it completed and water running by 2036. Now, when they first came about around the farms, it was, you carry on running the business, you do what you want to do, you put a new shed up, do it, you'll get compensated for it if we go ahead. Now, they came round, some of the farmers, a month or so ago, you do not do anything else on your farm because you will not be compensated for it. But yet they haven't said yet if it's going ahead or not. So to me, they're trying to rule you already for the businesses that's out there. They're affecting them by saying you are not going to do this on your farm now, else you're not going to be compensated anymore for it. But we haven't really decided yet if it's going to go ahead or not. Councillor Marks?
Wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Clark, and I think, as we've just heard from Mr Palmer, that it now sounds like Anglian Water and yourselves are working in conjunction with each other.
So, I just want to reiterate, the proposal that the Eastern Powerhouse is working on with the leaders of the two councils is not proposing that this is done instead of the main reservoir. Our concern is that the reservoir is going to take, it's going to be probably at least 2036, but my concern is it will be considerably longer. So here is a way for you to be, as I keep saying, using the word, you can be proactive here because you can do something in the short term. It would not be the same solution that a single reservoir would offer, but it offers you water security and the ability to grow your economy in the short term. So Anglian Water are members of ours. If our offer to take this forward is accepted by the two councils, we would certainly have Anglian Water in the tent working with us. We would certainly not do anything that would undermine Anglian Water and obviously we would need to have not just the IDBs, who we have spoken to already, but the Environment Agency and Anglian Water. This is a significant project. It would need to have the advice of all of those. So this isn't we'll do this instead. This is, here we are, we can do this now. You as an authority can have the confidence that you have water security, and then you can spend a bit more time potentially about what Steve Cowan had to say about putting the corners in and making it whatever you need it to be. That's just really, I suppose.
Thank you. To be fair, this probably future-proofs the big reservoir anyway, because if it's going to be delayed, this as an interim, which will then give extra storage, is probably no bad thing. What I would ask, Chair, is could we invite both James back and also Anglian Water to the next meeting so we can hear what both parties together have got to say? Would you agree with that, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, James's proposal, I haven't heard anywhere where the money's going to come from to deliver this. I've heard from Anglian Water that, all the geological things are all adding up. We were told that they were getting put under pressure to deliver it sooner than they expected to. But we understand that Anglian Water are going to be able to add a percentage to the water bills to pay for it. So that is the journey. And no disrespect to James, you can have all these ideas, but someone has to pick the tab up. And even if it's a good idea and then there's nobody pick the tab up, it doesn't get delivered.
So you're absolutely right, John. If the Eastern Power has had 100 million quid, it'd be nice, But the whole point of this is to put together a document that's well researched, that's well put together, that we could then take to government as an opportunity for government to make a difference to water scarcity in the UK within the lifespan of this Parliament. So it is a bid to government for government money. This is not something that Fenland District Council, East Cambs District Council, or the County Council are going to fund at all. This is a direct request to government, attempt to get government to fund a project here in the Fens.
When they're taking the heating allowance away from old people.
Well, I can't solve all the problems.
Things.
How come you always remember to turn it off and never remember?
Don't ask me. Oh, dear me. But I think the other thing that obviously is music to my ears as well, obviously how to obtain finance and lobbying government. And I think then having the more team members involved brings us strength, hence Fenland, but also the gift of being in charge of our own planning. And I think that's important as well, that we have a voice in that. It's not somebody else outside of our jurisdiction that's making those decisions. So, with the small reservoirs. So, no, I don't think so. Oh, sorry, Charlie.
Yeah, I think we just need to also be careful that we actually get middle level on board, because middle level may still say no extraction, and that could snooker the whole thing. We need to know that middle level are happy for this to happen and fill these reservoirs.
Personally, me and James, I didn't personally think we want the EA anywhere near them. I think that would be an absolute recipe for disaster completely. I can't see why middle level wouldn't want, basically it's a free outlet for them in one way. So it saves the pumping fees of it going through St Germans and whatnot. But I know they've got to pump it into the reservoirs what is being built.
But I suppose the same question would be, why haven't they given extraction licenses previously?
Sorry, Chair, I've come in there interrupting and jumping in, but we have sufficient members on middle level main board and subsidiary boards where we can actually ask those questions and demand answers. So I think that point's up to us then, as councillors.
Just start on me. So, agenda item 11. We now need to agree future work commitment agenda items. Yeah, next question.
I think there was a proposal, wasn't there, by James Palmer, agreed by the committee, that it would be worthwhile having James back and Anglia Water to discuss the proposal that was given to members this afternoon. Absolutely, yes, Councillor Cart, you're right, and indeed the internal drainage boards, thank you.
So, do we have any other items of business to discuss?
Through you, Chair, I just think it's been an interesting meeting. It's my first one.
So,
and I think the speakers themselves have been really, really interesting this afternoon.
Have there been no further items? Sorry, Councillor Clark.
Just thinking ahead, if we're going to have Anglian Water, the powerhouse, and also middle level, this is going to also mean there is quite a big economic part to this as well regarding economic growth. If we have 100 reservoirs, we don't have the input that one big reservoir and all the things that will bring with it. And I see the economic growth team over there nodding their head. I feel it'd be worth also having a presentation from them just to hear what they believe the Anglian Water reservoir would bring regarding growth to the area in comparison to 100 little reservoirs. Because at the end of the day, that's going to make a difference as well to the growth of Fenland, both economically, families coming in, building, everything else. So it would be interesting to hear their take on it as well. I don't think it needs to be war and peace, but I think if we could get an overall feeling of what they believe is going to happen in the future, should the reservoir take place, we can almost work out 100 reservoirs. You're going to have some guys digging some holes, but that's going to be the end of it, and a few fisheries. But I think there's a big economic growth to one big reservoir. So I would ask that the economic growth team be here as well.
I'm going to say at least Councillor Laws now knows why airplanes smell like beef burgers when they've been sprayed with de-ice.
It don't go down there, does it?
Apparently, allegedly, it seeps And I checked with the captain of the laboratory, and they're absolutely right, potato marketing.
If it kills it, it's going on. So, there's been no other business. This marks the end of this meeting. So I declare this meeting closed. So the next meeting will be held on the 10th of March 2025. Yeah, I always say about January for it to end in March if we've got that lot coming.
I'm just concerned that I think the space is too long for what we need to discuss and people that we need to get here. I just think March is too far. Do you think January? January?
Well, that's not far away,
Can you
is
get
it?
your act together by
January.
January?
I can get it together tomorrow if you want me to.
Oh, there you go.